At a luxury restaurant, he humiliated his pregnant wife in front of his mistress, believing nothing could touch him. But when the waiter handed him a discreet note, he stood up in panic and vanished. The cold Boston wind whipped against Brielle Montgomery's face as she stepped out of the taxi in front of Aurelia, the city's most exclusive restaurant. The elegant stone facade, illuminated by soft amber lights, stood as a monument to luxury in the heart of Beacon Hill. Tonight was special, her 32nd birthday. But more importantly, it marked the beginning of something miraculous she'd nearly stopped believing could happen. "Mrs. Montgomery, welcome back," the doorman greeted, recognizing her immediately. "Happy birthday, ma'am." "Thank you, Thomas," she replied with a warm smile, adjusting her deep blue dress that subtly concealed the almost imperceptible curve of her belly. Inside, the restaurant hummed with the quiet conversation of Boston's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over white tablecloths and polished silverware. Brielle's hand instinctively went to her small clutch purse, feeling the outline of the gift-wrapped pregnancy test inside, her announcement planned for the perfect moment during dessert. Thaddeus Kingston, Aurelia's maître d' for nearly 20 years, spotted her immediately. At 58, with silver hair and impeccable posture, he had an almost preternatural ability to read guests and situations. "Mrs. Montgomery, what a pleasure to see you this evening," he said, his voice carrying the refined edge that had served him through decades in fine dining. Dr. Montgomery called to say he might be running slightly behind. "May I escort you to your table?" Brielle nodded, following Thaddeus through the main dining room. She couldn't help but notice the admiring glances from other diners. Her position as the lead conservator of European Impressionism at the Museum of Fine Arts had made her recognizable in Boston's cultural circles. The Montgomery name carried weight. Her husband's surgical innovations had saved countless lives, while her work preserving priceless art treasures had earned her professional respect in her own right. As she settled at their usual table overlooking the public garden, Brielle felt a flutter of nerves. After 5 years of marriage and 3 grueling years of fertility treatments, including 2 failed rounds of IVF, she had nearly resigned herself to childlessness. The natural pregnancy had been such a shock that she'd taken 3 tests before believing it was real. "Would you care for some water while you wait, Mrs. Montgomery?" asked a young waiter approaching the table. His name tag read Wesley, and though his manner was professional, there was something observant and intelligent in his eyes that distinguished him from the typical server. "Yes, thank you. And perhaps some cranberry juice as well," she requested, avoiding her usual pre-dinner champagne. "Of course." Wesley nodded, his gaze lingering curiously on her for a moment before he departed. As Brielle watched him walk away, she noticed something odd. Wesley detoured briefly to speak with Thaddeus, both men glancing discreetly toward the restaurant's private dining section. Thaddeus's normally unflappable expression showed a flicker of concern before he composed himself. Wesley returned moments later with her drinks. "Your cranberry juice, Mrs. Montgomery. Are you celebrating something special tonight?" "My birthday, actually," she answered with a small smile. "Many happy returns," Wesley replied, then hesitated slightly. "The kitchen has prepared a special amuse-bouche this evening. Would you prefer to wait for Dr. Montgomery, or would you like it served now?" "I'll wait, thank you." Brielle checked her watch. Elliot was now 20 minutes late, unusual for a man who prided himself on punctuality. She pulled out her phone, but there were no messages. From his station near the entrance, Thaddeus observed Brielle with growing discomfort. 38 years in the restaurant business had honed his instincts, and tonight something was decidedly off. Dr. Montgomery's call earlier had been strange, requesting their usual table for his wife's birthday, but also reserving a second table in the restaurant's more secluded area. When the doctor had arrived an hour ago with a striking young woman, Thaddeus had assumed it was a colleague joining them for celebration. Now, he wasn't so sure. Wesley Reed had noticed it too. At 25, he was saving for nursing school and had only been at Aurelia for 8 months, but his observational skills were exceptional. Dr. Montgomery and his companion had been engaged in intense conversation, too intimate for colleagues, too tense for friends. "Do you think we should say something?" Wesley murmured to Thaddeus as he passed the service station. "It's not our place to interfere in guests' personal matters," Thaddeus replied, though his eyes betrayed his concern. "However, perhaps check if Mrs. Montgomery would like some bread while she waits." As Wesley turned to fulfill this task, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. Dr. Elliot Montgomery emerged from the private dining area, a tall woman with sleek black hair following closely behind him. Thaddeus immediately registered the doctor's expression, determined but tense, his jaw set in a way that suggested he was steeling himself for something unpleasant. Brielle looked up, relief washing over her face at the sight of her husband, only to be replaced by confusion as she noticed his companion. "Elliot? I was getting worried," she said, her eyes moving questioningly to the woman beside him. Close up, Elliot Montgomery cut an impressive figure, tall and fit at 38, with piercing blue eyes and premature silver at his temples that only enhanced his distinguished appearance. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that complemented Brielle's dress, a detail that now seemed cruelly ironic. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his voice carrying none of the warmth one would expect on his wife's birthday. He didn't move to kiss her cheek or even touch her shoulder, the first sign that something was terribly wrong. "Brielle, this is Vanessa Caldwell," Elliot continued, gesturing to the woman beside him. "I thought it was time you two met formally." Vanessa Caldwell was striking, younger than Brielle by several years, with flawless olive skin and a figure that her simple black dress highlighted perfectly. She seemed uncomfortable, her eyes darting between Elliot and Brielle. "Dr. Caldwell? From the hospital?" Brielle asked, recognition dawning. Elliot had mentioned an anesthesiologist who had recently joined his surgical team. "I don't understand. Why are you bringing a colleague to our dinner, Elliot?" Wesley, who had been approaching with a breadbasket, froze several feet away, instantly sensing the tension. He backed away slowly, exchanging a glance with Thaddeus, who had also noticed the confrontation unfolding. "Perhaps we should sit," Elliot said, pulling out a chair for Vanessa before taking his own seat. The deliberate care he showed the other woman was not lost on anyone watching. "Elliot, what's going on?" Brielle asked, her voice now carrying an edge of fear. Elliot took a large sip of water, set the glass down precisely, and looked directly at his wife. "I've been trying to find the right time for this conversation, Brielle. I thought today might actually be appropriate, a clear delineation point." "Delineation point?" Brielle repeated, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. "What are you talking about?" "Vanessa and I have been involved for nearly a year," Elliot stated, his clinical tone matching how he might deliver a difficult diagnosis. "It's serious. I've decided to end our marriage." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. At nearby tables, conversations faltered as patrons became unwillingly aware of the drama unfolding. "You're leaving me," Brielle whispered, her voice barely audible. "And you decided to tell me on my birthday? In public?" "I thought a public setting would encourage civility," Elliot replied coolly. "You tend to become emotional, Brielle. I wanted to avoid a scene." Wesley, having retreated to the service station, watched in growing horror. "This is wrong," he muttered to Thaddeus. "We can't just stand here. We must respect our guests' privacy," Thaddeus replied, though his own expression had hardened. "But perhaps prepare a private room, just in case Mrs. Montgomery needs some space." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Elliot, you said she knew about us," she said quietly. "You told me this was a formality, that you were already separated." "Another lie," Brielle said, her shock giving way to anger. "How convenient that seems to be your specialty, Elliot." Elliot's expression darkened. "Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. I've already spoken with my attorney. The paperwork will be ready next week. You'll be well provided for, of course." "Well provided for?" Brielle repeated incredulously. "After 5 years of marriage, after everything we've been through together, the fertility treatments, She stopped abruptly, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. "Yes, the failed fertility treatments," Elliot said dismissively. "Another reason why this is for the best. We both know having a child was important to you, and medically it's unlikely to happen for us. Vanessa is younger and—" "I'm pregnant," Brielle interrupted, the words escaping before she could plan their delivery. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient restaurant noise seemed to fade away. Elliot's expression froze, a flicker of something, shock, disbelief, perhaps even fear, crossing his face before his features rearranged into skepticism. "That's impossible," he said flatly. "You know my condition makes the chances virtually non-existent. The specialists were quite clear." "Apparently they were wrong," Brielle replied, her voice stronger now. "I'm 8 weeks along. I have the ultrasound pictures in my purse. I was going to tell you tonight during dessert." Vanessa's face had drained of color. She looked at Elliot questioningly, but he avoided her gaze. "If you are pregnant," Elliot said, emphasizing the if with cruel precision, "then perhaps we should discuss who the father might be." The accusation landed like a physical blow. Brielle recoiled, her face flushing with humiliation and rage. "How dare you?" she breathed. "You stand there with your mistress and accuse me of infidelity." Several diners were now openly staring. An older couple at a nearby table exchanged whispers of disapproval, their eyes fixed on Elliot. From across the restaurant, Thaddeus noticed something unusual. A woman seated alone in the restaurant's eastern section was watching the Montgomery table with intense interest. She caught his eye briefly before scribbling something on a napkin and gesturing subtly to Wesley. Wesley approached her table cautiously. "Please give this to Dr. Montgomery immediately," the woman said, pressing the folded napkin into his hand. "It's urgent." Wesley nodded, taking the napkin and making his way to the Montgomery table, where the confrontation was escalating. "You've never respected my career or my contributions to this marriage," Brielle was saying, struggling to keep her voice steady. "But I never imagined you could be this cruel." "Your career?" Elliot scoffed, brushing dust off old paintings while I save lives. "Let's be realistic about who has carried the weight in this relationship, Brielle." Wesley approached the table, uncomfortable but determined. "Excuse me, Dr. Montgomery," he said, extending the folded napkin. "A message for you, sir. The lady said it was urgent." Elliot snatched the napkin with irritation. "This is hardly the time for—" he began, but stopped abruptly as he unfolded it and read the message inside. His face, previously flushed with controlled anger, now drained of all color. "What is it?" Vanessa asked, reaching for the napkin. Elliot crumpled it in his fist before she could see. "I have to go," he announced, standing so quickly that his chair teetered precariously. "Hospital emergency." "Elliot, you can't just—" Brielle started. "We'll finish this discussion later." He cut her off, already stepping away from the table. To Vanessa, he added tersely, "Don't wait up. This might take all night." And with that, he was gone, leaving Brielle and Vanessa staring after him in stunned silence, the crumpled napkin abandoned on the table like a cryptic clue to a mystery neither woman fully understood. Wesley remained nearby, torn between professional discretion and genuine concern for the two women left in the wake of Dr. Montgomery's abrupt departure. Whatever had been written on that napkin had clearly shaken the surgeon to his core, and Wesley couldn't help but wonder what secret could be powerful enough to disrupt even the doctor's carefully orchestrated cruelty. The silence following Elliot's departure felt like a physical presence at the table. Brielle stared at the crumpled napkin, her mind struggling to process the multiple blows that had been dealt to her in mere minutes. Vanessa broke the silence first. "I swear I didn't know," she said, her voice trembling, "about your pregnancy or that he hadn't told you about us. He said you had an arrangement." Brielle laughed bitterly. "An arrangement? Is that what he called our marriage? 5 years reduced to an arrangement?" She pressed her fingers to her temples. "God, what a fool I've been." Wesley hovered nearby, watching as Brielle reached for the napkin Elliot had left behind. He saw her hand trembling as she carefully unfolded it, smoothing out the wrinkles. Her eyes widened as she read the message. "Who gave this to you?" she asked Wesley, looking up with newfound intensity. "A woman sitting alone in the east section," Wesley replied. "Dark hair, red dress, probably in her 40s. "That's Sophia Whitman," Vanessa said, recognition flashing across her face. "Dr. Whitman's wife. He's the chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Mass General. And apparently my husband's partner in more than just surgery," Brielle said, turning the napkin so Vanessa could read it. The hastily scrawled note read, "I know about the Cayman accounts. Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Choose wisely." It was signed simply S.W. "Cayman accounts?" Vanessa frowned. "What does that mean?" Before Brielle could respond, a woman approached their table. She moved with practiced grace, her red dress a statement of both wealth and confidence. Her expression, however, was grim. "Mrs. Montgomery, Dr. Caldwell," she acknowledged them both. "I'm Sophia Whitman. May I join you? I believe we have matters of mutual interest to discuss." Thaddeus appeared as if conjured by the tension. "Ladies, perhaps you'd be more comfortable in our private dining room, away from—" His eyes swept meaningfully across the restaurant, where several patrons were still watching with undisguised curiosity. "That would be appreciated," Brielle said, gathering her composure. As they followed Thaddeus, she caught Wesley's eye. The young man who served us, could he attend to our table? I'd prefer consistent service this evening. Thaddeus nodded, understanding the subtext of her request. Wesley had already proven himself discreet and compassionate. Once settled in the private room, with Wesley quietly arranging fresh drinks, a sparkling water for Brielle, wine for the others, Sophia Whitman took control of the conversation. First, Mrs. Montgomery, let me apologize for interrupting your birthday dinner, though it seems Dr. Montgomery had already accomplished that. Her tone was crisp but not unkind. I've been wanting to speak with you for some time, but James, my husband, convinced me to wait. Recent discoveries have made waiting impossible. What discoveries exactly? Brielle asked, her art conservator's analytical mind already piecing together fragments of a larger picture. 3 months ago, I noticed discrepancies in our family finances, Sophia began. James has always handled the money, but something felt off. I hired a forensic accountant discreetly. What he found was, she paused, choosing her words carefully, substantial. Your husband and mine have been diverting funds from the hospital's Cardiology Research Foundation for nearly 3 years. Vanessa gasped. The Montgomery Whitman Foundation, but that's funded by major donors, grants, and insurance reimbursements, government research allocations, and patient contributions, Sophia finished. Approximately $2.3 million has been funneled through shell companies to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Wesley, who had been quietly arranging bread and water at the side table, dropped a fork. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I should leave you to your privacy. Actually, Brielle said, surprising herself, would you mind staying? I have a feeling I might need a witness to whatever else I'm about to learn tonight. She turned back to Sophia. Please continue. Sophia nodded, seemingly unfazed by the request. James confessed everything when I confronted him 2 weeks ago. He's cooperating with the hospital board now. They're conducting an internal investigation before involving external authorities. And Elliot doesn't know? Brielle asked. He suspects, but he doesn't know the extent of what James has revealed, Sophia confirmed. Your husband is the primary architect of the scheme, Mrs. Montgomery. James was just the enabler. Brielle felt sick. The Elliot she thought she knew, brilliant, ambitious, sometimes cold but always ethical, was disintegrating before her eyes. This can't be happening, Vanessa murmured. I've assisted him in surgeries, seen him save lives. How could he? He had me sign forms, Brielle interrupted, a memory surfacing. Last year, for a home equity line of credit. He said it was for renovations to the house. The work never happened, but I didn't question it. I was focused on our 3rd round of IVF. She looked at Sophia. Was that part of this? Most likely. The money trail shows multiple sources feeding into the scheme. Wesley returned with a tray of hot tea. I thought this might help, he said quietly. The kitchen can prepare something light whenever you're ready. Thank you, Wesley, Brielle said, surprised by her ability to remember his name amid the chaos engulfing her life. There was something reassuring about his presence, a steady, compassionate counterpoint to the betrayal surrounding her. How long have you been seeing my husband? Brielle asked Vanessa directly, her voice surprisingly calm. Vanessa flinched, but answered honestly. 11 months. It started after a difficult surgery. He pursued me aggressively, said his marriage was in name only, that you'd grown apart after the fertility issues. And you believed him. I did, Vanessa admitted. But about 2 months ago things changed. He became secretive, stressed, started asking me to sign off on departmental budget reports without reviewing them. Her eyes widened with realization. I never thought, could I have been facilitating? Almost certainly, Sophia interjected, though he likely kept you in the dark just enough to maintain plausible deniability. It's his pattern. His pattern, Brielle repeated. This isn't the first time, is it? The affair, I mean. Sophia's expression softened with something close to pity. No, there was an OR nurse before Dr. Caldwell, and a hospital administrator before that. The 3 women fell silent, each processing their connection to the man who had deceived them all. Wesley refilled water glasses, his movements careful and unobtrusive. Why are you telling us this? Vanessa finally asked Sophia. Why tonight? Self-interest, partly, Sophia admitted. James has agreed to testify against Elliot in exchange for leniency, but that process will go more smoothly if Elliot has no warning, no time to hide assets or destroy evidence. She looked directly at Brielle. And, partly because no woman deserves to be ambushed and humiliated as you were tonight, I've been married to James for 20 years. I know what it's like to discover your life is built on quicksand. Brielle stared into her teacup, watching the amber liquid swirl. 8 weeks ago, a miracle had happened inside her body. Tonight, her marriage had died in public. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. With the pregnancy, she began slowly, I'll need stability, security. If what you're saying is true, Elliot could face criminal charges. Our assets might be frozen or seized. The hospital board is meeting tomorrow morning, Sophia said. They'll likely refer the case to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit by noon. I'd recommend securing your own legal representation immediately. Separate from Elliot's. I know someone, Wesley spoke up unexpectedly. All three women turned to him again. My sister is a family law attorney who specializes in high-conflict divorces. She works with a firm that has a white-collar crime division. He colored slightly under their scrutiny. Sorry if that's overstepping. It's not, Brielle assured him. Would your sister be available for a consultation tomorrow? I'm sure she would, Wesley nodded. She's been helping me with my nursing school applications. I could call her tonight. A strange calm settled over Brielle. The initial shock was giving way to something else, a clarity she hadn't experienced in years. She thought about the painting she'd been restoring at the museum, a Monet that had been damaged by improper varnish. Layer by layer, she'd been removing the cloudy film, revealing the true colors beneath. Now she was experiencing the same process in her own life. I need to make preparations tonight, she said decisively, before Elliot returns home. You shouldn't be alone, Vanessa said, surprising herself with the protective impulse she felt toward the woman she had inadvertently wronged. You could stay at the Elliot Hotel, Wesley suggested. It's nearby and I have a friend at the front desk who could arrange a room discreetly. Sophia reached into her purse. Take this, she said, sliding a business card across the table. My personal cell is on the back. James and I will be at the board meeting tomorrow. Elliot doesn't know I've spoken to you and it might be better to keep it that way for now. Brielle nodded, a plan forming in her mind. There are documents at home, financial records, account information, things I'll need. I can drive you, Vanessa offered. Help you gather what you need, it's the least I can do. The unlikely alliance forming between them would have been unthinkable hours earlier. Yet here they were, three women connected by the same man's deception, finding common cause in its aftermath. There's one more thing you should consider, Sophia said carefully. The media will be all over this once it breaks. Prominent surgeons embezzle millions from patient fund makes quite a headline. Your privacy, your reputation, your pregnancy, all will be fair game to them. The museum, Brielle murmured, thinking of her career, her colleagues. I need to speak with the director before this becomes public. Wesley, who had been quietly efficient throughout the evening, now stepped forward. Mrs. Montgomery, if I may, sometimes the best defense is a strong offense. My sister always says that whoever controls the narrative first usually wins. What are you suggesting? Brielle asked. Document everything tonight. Your pregnancy, the confrontation, hear what Mrs. Whitman has told you. File for divorce first thing tomorrow before the board meeting. Position yourself as a victim seeking protection for your unborn child, not as the wife who might have benefited from the scheme. All three women stared at him with newfound respect. That's actually brilliant, Sophia admitted. James's attorney suggested the same approach for me. Brielle felt a surge of something unfamiliar, not quite hope, but perhaps its precursor, determination. Then that's what I'll do, she said, squaring her shoulders. Tonight I gather evidence. Tomorrow I file for divorce and protection of assets. By the time Elliot realizes what's happening, it will be too late. As she spoke, she placed her hand protectively over her stomach. The child growing inside her would never know the father she had thought she married, because that man had never existed. Instead, her child would know a mother who faced betrayal with courage and rebuilt her life with integrity. Wesley, she said quietly, I'd like to accept your offer of help with the hotel, and if your sister is available tomorrow morning, please tell her I'll need her services urgently. Of course, Mrs. Montgomery. Brielle, she corrected him. I think after tonight, you've earned the right to call me Brielle. He nodded, a small smile touching his lips. I'll make the arrangements right away. Brielle. As he stepped away to make the necessary calls, Brielle looked between Sophia and Vanessa, unlikely allies in the strangest of circumstances. Ladies, I believe we have work to do. The three women clinked their glasses in a toast that contained no celebration, only solidarity and resolve. Outside the private dining room, the refined world of Aurelia continued its evening service, unaware that within its walls, a woman's life had been destroyed and reborn in the space of a single dinner. Mrs. Montgomery, could you please clarify when you first became aware of the financial irregularities? Brielle sat in a stark conference room at the Boston FBI field office, a glass of water untouched before her. At 12 weeks pregnant, the morning sickness had finally begun to subside, only to be replaced by bone-deep fatigue that no amount of rest seemed to cure. 3 weeks ago, the night of my 32nd birthday, she replied, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. That's when Mrs. Whitman first informed me of her suspicions regarding my husband's financial activities. Special Agent Diana Mercer nodded, making notes in a slim black notebook. At 45, she had investigated dozens of white-collar criminals, but the Montgomery Whitman case was generating unprecedented publicity. 2 renowned surgeons embezzling from their own charitable foundation was the kind of scandal that Boston's elite circles couldn't resist. And you had no prior knowledge of the Cayman accounts, the shell corporations, the invoices for non-existent medical equipment? None, Brielle confirmed. As I've stated in my previous interviews, my husband handled our finances. My name appears on joint accounts and some property deeds, but I was not involved in day-to-day financial management. Alexandra Rivera, Brielle's attorney and Wesley's sister, interjected. Agent Mercer, my client, has been fully cooperative for the past 3 weeks. She's provided all financial records in her possession, submitted to multiple interviews, and signed an affidavit detailing her knowledge of the situation. Unless you have new questions, I'd like to conclude today's session. Just one more thing, Mercer said, sliding a folder across the table. We've obtained these bank statements from your husband's private safety deposit box. They show transfers from your personal inheritance account to one of the shell companies, Meridian Surgical Innovations. Can you explain these transactions? Brielle stared at the documents, her stomach clenching with a new wave of betrayal. The statements showed 4 transfers over the past 2 years, totaling nearly $300,000, money from her grandmother's estate that she'd been saving for their future child's education. I did not authorize these transfers, she said quietly. That account required only one signature, mine. These must be forged. We believe so too, Mercer agreed. Our forensic accountants are confirming, but the preliminary analysis supports your claim. Dr. Montgomery appears to have been quite thorough in his efforts to secure funds. Outside the federal building, a fine April rain fell on Boston. Brielle huddled under Alexandra's umbrella as they hurried to the waiting car, ignoring the small cluster of reporters camped near the entrance. Mrs. Montgomery, is it true your husband fled the country? Brielle, how does it feel to discover your lifestyle was funded by stolen money? Are you cooperating against Dr. Montgomery to save yourself? Alexandra efficiently bundled Brielle into the car before the questions could escalate. Vultures, she muttered, sliding in beside her client. You're doing incredibly well, Brielle. Most people would have crumbled under this kind of pressure. I don't have the luxury of crumbling, Brielle replied, resting her hand on her stomach, a gesture that had become automatic in recent weeks. Not anymore. The car pulled away from the curb, heading toward the small apartment Brielle had rented in Cambridge, after the FBI had frozen most of her assets. The 5-bedroom Victorian in Beacon Hill, the home she'd lovingly restored over 5 years, was now inaccessible, sealed as potential evidence and likely to be seized to help repay the embezzled funds. The museum called again, Brielle said, staring out at the rain-slicked streets. They want to discuss my position tomorrow. Alexandra frowned. They can't fire you for being married to Elliot. That would be discrimination. They can put me on indefinite leave. The board is concerned about institutional reputation. Brielle laughed bitterly. 5 years of flawless work, 2 major restoration projects that put the MFA on the international map, and now they're worried my presence might taint their precious reputation. If they try anything, we'll add wrongful termination to our growing list of legal battles, Alexandra assured her. Speaking of which, I've filed the emergency motion to release funds for your medical care. The hearing is set for next Tuesday. Brielle nodded absently, her thoughts elsewhere. Have they found him yet? Alexandra's silence was answer enough. Elliot Montgomery had vanished the morning after the hospital board meeting, missing his scheduled interview with the FBI. His passport had been used to board a flight to Dubai, but after that the trail went cold. Some believed he had continued to a non-extradition country. Others thought he might be hiding in plain sight with a new identity. "He'll surface eventually," Alexandra said. "Men like Elliot can't stay hidden forever. Their egos won't allow it." The car pulled up outside a modest brick apartment building, a far cry from Brielle's former home. As they prepared to exit, Brielle's phone chimed with a text message. The name on the screen made her pause. Vanessa Caldwell. "Coffee at Thinking Cup in an hour. Need to talk. Important." "Go ahead without me," Brielle told Alexandra. "I need to meet someone." The Thinking Cup on Newbury Street was crowded with afternoon patrons seeking shelter from the rain. Vanessa had secured a small table near the back, 2 steaming mugs already waiting. She rose when she spotted Brielle weaving through the crowded cafe. "Thank you for coming," she said, the formality betraying her nervousness. Though they'd spoken several times since that fateful night at Aurelia, their relationship remained complicated, built on shared victimhood rather than genuine friendship. "Your message sounded urgent," Brielle replied, settling into the chair across from her. She noted the dark circles under Vanessa's eyes, the tension in her shoulders. "The hospital board met this morning," Vanessa began. "They've suspended my clinical privileges, pending a full investigation into my involvement with the Foundation's finances." "But you weren't involved," Brielle protested. "You've cooperated fully with the FBI." "Apparently that's not enough." Vanessa pushed a folder across the table. "This arrived at my apartment this morning. No return address, but I know it's from Elliot." Brielle hesitated before opening it. Inside were copies of emails between Vanessa and Elliot, dating back to the beginning of their affair. Intimate messages, explicit photographs, but also, crucially, several exchanges discussing Foundation budget reports that Vanessa had signed off on without proper review. "He's setting you up," Brielle realized, "making it look like you were his accomplice." "There's more," Vanessa said, her voice dropping. "The last page." Brielle turned to it, finding a handwritten note in Elliot's precise script. "Vanessa, by now you've chosen sides, unwisely. These emails could ruin your career, or they could remain private. Your choice. Meet me tomorrow, 8 p.m. at our special place. Come alone, or these go to the board, the FBI, and the licensing committee. You know what I want." "He's blackmailing you," Brielle breathed. "But what does he want?" Vanessa reached into her handbag and extracted a small USB drive. "This. It's a backup of James Whitman's personal records. Elliot believes it contains evidence that would exonerate him and implicate James as the mastermind. Does it? I don't know. The FBI has the original, but apparently Elliot doesn't know that." Vanessa's hands trembled slightly. "He thinks I stole it from the anesthesiology department computer, where James had stored it. In reality, James gave it directly to the authorities weeks ago." Brielle's mind raced. "So Elliot's in Boston. He never left the country. Or he's back. Either way, he's desperate." Vanessa looked up, her eyes meeting Brielle's. "I'm afraid, Brielle, not just for my career, but I've never seen this side of him before. The calculated cruelty in that note. It's like he's a completely different person from the man I thought I knew." "He is," Brielle said quietly. "We both fell in love with the character he created." The realization had come to Brielle gradually over the past 3 weeks. Each new revelation, the embezzlement, the previous affairs, the forged signatures, had stripped away another layer of the Elliot she thought she knew, revealing a stranger beneath. "What are you going to do?" Brielle asked. "I've informed the FBI, but they want me to go through with the meeting. Wear a wire, try to get him to incriminate himself further." Vanessa hesitated. "I told them I'd think about it." "It's dangerous," Brielle warned. "If he suspects—" "I know. That's why I wanted to talk to you first." Vanessa took a deep breath. "There's something I haven't told the authorities yet. Something I discovered last week when I was going through old photos on my phone." She pulled up an image and passed her phone to Brielle. It showed Elliot in surgical scrubs standing beside an older man in a hospital corridor. The date stamp showed it was taken over a year ago. "That's Dr. Lawrence Harrington," Vanessa explained. "He was chief of cardiology at Boston Memorial until he died suddenly last June. Heart attack, ironically. I remember," Brielle said slowly. "Elliot spoke at his memorial service, said he was a mentor. What Elliot didn't mention was that Dr. Harrington had begun an internal audit of the cardiology department's research funds 2 weeks before his death. I overheard Elliot and James discussing it once, but didn't think much of it at the time." Brielle felt a chill run through her. "Are you suggesting—" I don't know what I'm suggesting, Vanessa admitted, but yesterday I requested Dr. Harrington's autopsy report out of curiosity. It noted trace amounts of digoxin in his system, a heart medication he wasn't prescribed. The implication hung between them, too monstrous to voice aloud. Brielle thought of the man she'd slept beside for 5 years, the surgeon whose hands had saved countless lives, and possibly taken one. You need to tell Agent Mercer, Brielle said firmly. Today. I will, Vanessa promised. But first I wanted to warn you, if Elliot is capable of what I suspect, then neither of us is safe, especially you. Me? Why especially me? Because you're carrying his child, Vanessa said, the heir to what's left of the Montgomery fortune, and because you're the one person whose testimony could destroy him completely. Brielle instinctively wrapped her arms around her midsection, protecting the small life growing within. The pregnancy had become her anchor amid the chaos, the one pure thing untouched by Elliot's deception. There's something else, Vanessa continued hesitantly. Something I didn't want to tell you, but now I think you need to know. Brielle braced herself. What is it? Last summer, when we'd been seeing each other about 3 months, Elliot told me he was thinking of leaving you. I asked why he'd stayed in the marriage if he was so unhappy. He said... Vanessa paused, visibly uncomfortable. He said it was partly for appearances. That being married to the granddaughter of Ellington Hughes gave him social connections he needed. But he also mentioned your inheritance, said he'd invested too much time to walk away empty-handed. The name hit Brielle like a physical blow. Her grandfather, Ellington Hughes, had been a prominent investment banker whose family had helped shape Boston for generations. His fortune, while not vast by billionaire standards, was significant and carefully controlled by trusts that would fully mature when Brielle turned 35, just 3 years from now. He married me for my family connections, Brielle whispered, pieces falling into place. All those charity galas he insisted we attend, the social events he claimed to hate but never missed, those weren't for his career. They were investments in his network. I'm sorry, Vanessa said, reaching across the table to touch Brielle's hand. I should have told you sooner. Brielle shook her head. It wouldn't have made a difference. 3 weeks ago I was still in shock. Now, she straightened her shoulders. Now I can use this information. Her phone buzzed, a text from Wesley. Over the past 3 weeks, the young waiter had become an unexpected source of support, checking in regularly and even helping her move into the Cambridge apartment. Just heard from my hospital contact. E was spotted near the medical center. Be careful. As Brielle read the message, a chill premonition washed over her. If Elliot was truly in Boston, truly desperate enough to blackmail Vanessa, what else might he do? We need to go to the FBI now, she told Vanessa. Together. What about the meeting tomorrow? Should I wear the wire? The question presented Brielle with an impossible choice. Helping the FBI catch Elliot could finally end this nightmare, but it would put Vanessa in direct danger from a man who might be capable of murder. Yet refusing to help might allow Elliot to escape justice again, remaining a shadow over Brielle's life and her child's future. As rain streamed down the cafe windows, Brielle Montgomery faced the most difficult decision of her unraveling life: protect her unlikely friend or secure her child's future from the man who had destroyed everything else. This is just a temporary measure, Brielle, a sabbatical, not a termination. Margaret Chen, director of the Museum of Fine Arts, sat across from Brielle in her modernist office. Outside, May sunshine bathed the museum gardens in golden light that seemed to mock the gravity of their conversation. 6 months without pay is hardly temporary, Margaret, Brielle replied, keeping her voice level despite the anxiety churning inside her. At 16 weeks pregnant, her condition was now visible beneath her loose blouse. The Degas restoration is at a critical stage. I'm the only one on staff with the expertise to complete it, which is precisely why we're not letting you go entirely, Margaret countered. But the board is unanimous. Until the Montgomery Whitman case is resolved, your presence creates complications. Brielle understood the unspoken reality. Wealthy donors were uncomfortable. The media remained ravenous, and the museum's reputation was deemed more important than loyalty to a dedicated employee. She had expected this outcome, but the reality still stung. I've arranged for your benefits to continue, Margaret added, her tone softening. Health insurance, at least, given your condition. It was small consolation, but crucial. Without insurance, the pregnancy would quickly deplete what little savings Brielle had managed to shelter before the freeze on her joint accounts. "Thank you," she said simply, rising to leave. "I'll clear out my office this afternoon." As she walked through the museum's grand galleries, Brielle allowed her hand to trail along a marble bench, a subtle farewell to the institution that had been her professional home for 7 years. The Degas ballerinas watched from their gilded frame, eternally suspended in motion. She had restored their faded blue tutus just last year, bringing them back to life brushstroke by painstaking brushstroke. Now she would have to find a way to restore her own life, without the resources she had once taken for granted. "You're getting better at this," Wesley observed as he adjusted Brielle's stance. "Keep your wrists straight when you punch." The community center gym echoed with the sound of fists hitting pads. Brielle had resisted Wesley's suggestion to try boxing at first, dismissing it as too aggressive for her taste. Now 3 weeks into their sessions, she found unexpected solace in the physical exertion. "The doctor said moderate exercise is good for the baby," she replied, landing another jab on the pad Wesley held. "Though I'm not sure she had boxing in mind." Wesley grinned. "My sister went to kickboxing classes until she was 7 months pregnant. Her son turned out fine. He's in kindergarten now, and only occasionally roundhouse kicks his classmates." The joke elicited a genuine laugh from Brielle, a sound that had been rare in recent months. Since their unlikely meeting at Aurelia, Wesley had become a constant in her upended life. As a nursing student whose clinical rotations included maternal care, he offered both emotional support and practical advice about her pregnancy. More importantly, he treated her as Brielle the person, not Brielle the victim, or Brielle the pregnant ex-wife of an infamous criminal. "Anything new with the job hunt?" he asked as they took a water break. Brielle sighed. "2 more rejections this week. Turns out museums are a small world, and no one wants to risk associating with the Montgomery scandal." She took a long drink. "But I have an interview at Boston University next week, a 1-year lecturer position in their art conservation program. The pay is half what I made at the MFA, but it would cover rent and groceries." "That's progress," Wesley encouraged. "And your court hearing?" "Thursday. Alexandra thinks the judge will finally release some of my personal funds, enough to get me through until the baby comes at least." She rubbed her growing belly pensively. "It's strange. For 3 years this pregnancy was all I wanted. Now that it's happening, everything around it has fallen apart." "Not everything," Wesley corrected gently. "You've got a solid legal team, a new apartment, friends who care about you. That's more than some people have after a lifetime of trying." Brielle nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. The past 2 months had stripped away her material comforts, her professional identity, and her social standing. Yet somehow, she felt more authentic than she had in years, as if Elliot's betrayal had freed her from a gilded cage she hadn't recognized until the door swung open. "Speaking of friends," she said, checking her phone, "Vanessa's testifying today. I promised to meet her for dinner afterward." Wesley's expression tightened slightly at the mention of Vanessa. He remained skeptical of the friendship that had developed between Brielle and her husband's former mistress, though he kept his reservations mostly to himself. "Just be careful," he cautioned. "The preliminary hearings are generating a lot of media attention. You might want to meet somewhere private." The federal courthouse steps teemed with reporters and curious onlookers. Brielle watched from across the street as Vanessa emerged, flanked by FBI agents and her attorney. Camera flashes erupted, capturing the moment for tomorrow's headlines. Vanessa had indeed worn the wire to meet Elliot 2 months earlier in a carefully orchestrated FBI operation. The meeting had resulted in Elliot's arrest as he attempted to flee the country with falsified documents and nearly $500,000 in cash. Since then, Vanessa had become the prosecution's star witness, trading her testimony for immunity from any potential charges related to the financial crimes. Their unlikely friendship had deepened through shared trauma. Both women had loved the same man, both had been betrayed by him, and both were now rebuilding lives from the wreckage he had left behind. That evening, they met at Vanessa's apartment, a sleek modern space in a high-security building where reporters couldn't follow. The prosecution asked for detailed testimony about the foundation budget meetings, Vanessa explained, pouring herbal tea for Brielle and wine for herself. "I described every instance where Elliot pressured me to sign off on reports without proper review." "How did he react?" Brielle asked, unable to suppress her curiosity about the man who had once been her husband. "Stone-faced throughout my testimony. But when I mentioned Dr. Harrington's death and the timing of the audit, he actually flinched. Vanessa shook her head. The prosecutor told me they're still investigating that angle, but without concrete evidence of foul play, they're focusing on the financial crimes. Those carry significant sentences anyway, Brielle noted. Alexandra says he's looking at 15-20 years with all the charges combined. If convicted, Vanessa added, his defense team is formidable and expensive. The comment raised a question Brielle had been puzzling over for weeks. Where is that money coming from? His assets are frozen, just like mine. Vanessa hesitated, swirling the wine in her glass. My attorney mentioned something about that today. Apparently they've traced payments to Elliot's legal team back to a holding company in Singapore. They suspect it's connected to a third person involved in the embezzlement scheme, someone who hasn't been identified yet. The revelation sent a chill through Brielle. A third person, not James Whitman? No, someone higher up, possibly on the hospital board itself. Vanessa set down her glass. Brielle, there's something else. Something I learned today that I'm not supposed to tell anyone. What is it? Elliot filed a motion with the family court. He's seeking paternity testing and partial custody of the baby. The world seemed to tilt beneath Brielle. That's impossible. He's in federal custody awaiting trial for multiple felonies. It's a legal maneuver. His attorneys know he won't get custody, but it complicates your divorce settlement and potentially gives him leverage. Vanessa's expression hardened. He's using your child as a bargaining chip, Brielle. The realization struck her with physical force. For weeks, Brielle had told herself that despite everything, Elliot wouldn't stoop to using their child as a weapon. Now, that last illusion was shattered. I need to call Alexandra, she said, reaching for her phone with trembling fingers. There's more, Vanessa said quietly. The prosecution believes Elliot may have offshore accounts they haven't located yet. If he manages to access those funds, he could flee if granted bail at any point. That's why they asked me about properties, investments, anything he might have mentioned during our relationship. And did he? Not directly. But once, after too much wine, he talked about a cottage on a lake in Vermont, said it belonged to a patient who'd offered it as thanks for saving his life. Elliot called it his escape hatch, a place where he could disappear if life in Boston ever became too constraining. Brielle frowned, accessing memories she'd nearly forgotten. The Henderson property. Malcolm Henderson was one of Elliot's first major cardiac cases after we were married. He invited us to his lake house one summer. Could Elliot have purchased it secretly? Used it to store cash or documents? It's worth looking into, Brielle agreed. I'll tell Alexandra tomorrow. As she prepared to leave, Vanessa embraced her, a gesture that would have been unthinkable months ago. Stay strong, Brielle, for yourself and the baby. I'm trying, Brielle replied honestly. Some days are harder than others. The small cafe near Cambridge Common had become Brielle's unofficial office. With free Wi-Fi and forgiving staff who didn't mind her occupying a table for hours, it provided a welcome alternative to her cramped apartment. You got the job, Alexandra announced triumphantly, sliding into the chair across from Brielle. Boston University just called my office. They're offering you the lecturer position starting fall semester. Relief flooded through Brielle. Thank God. That gives me 3 months to prepare before the baby comes in October. And the judge granted our motion this morning, Alexandra continued, her smile widening. Your personal inheritance account has been unfrozen. It's not the full amount, but it's enough to move you into a better apartment and cover expenses for the foreseeable future. For the first time in months, Brielle felt the weight on her shoulders lighten slightly. A stable income, access to some of her own money, health insurance through the university. The basic building blocks of security were finally falling into place. There's one catch with the BU position, Alexandra added, her expression turning serious. The dean wants a meeting first, to discuss, in his words, how the university will manage public relations regarding your appointment. Of course he does, Brielle sighed. The Montgomery scandal shadow follows me everywhere. It won't be forever, Alexandra assured her. Once the trial concludes, the media will move on to the next scandal. Until then, we manage the narrative as best we can. Brielle nodded, sipping her decaf tea. The baby kicked, a fluttering movement that still surprised her each time she felt it. What about Elliot's custody motion? Pure intimidation tactic, Alexandra replied firmly. No family court judge will grant custody rights to a defendant facing federal fraud charges, but it does mean we'll need to address paternity formally as part of the divorce proceedings. And the Vermont property. The FBI is investigating as we speak. If it exists and connects to the embezzlement, it could strengthen the prosecution's case considerably. As Alexandra outlined next steps for the divorce and pending criminal proceedings, Brielle found herself struck by how clinical it all sounded. The dismantling of her marriage reduced to legal strategy and tactical maneuvers. Yet beneath the professional detachment, she recognized Alexandra's fierce determination to protect her client. "Thank you," Brielle said, when Alexandra paused. "For everything." Alexandra's expression softened. "You've done the hard part, Brielle. You've survived. Now we build your future on your terms, not his." After Alexandra left, Brielle remained at the cafe, watching people pass by through the window. Normal lives, untouched by public scandal or betrayal. Once she had been one of them, a successful professional with a prestigious career and a seemingly perfect marriage. Now she understood how precarious that perfection had been, built on deception and compromise. Her phone chimed with a text from Wesley. "Apartment viewing at 3. 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood, 1st floor. No stairs to navigate with baby." She smiled, typing back, "Perfect. Meet you there." As she gathered her belongings, the cafe television caught her attention. Breaking news banner across the bottom of the screen. "Montgomery Whitman case. New evidence suggests third conspirator." Brielle froze, watching as the reporter outlined developments too recent to have reached Alexandra. Sources close to the investigation reveal that federal agents have uncovered evidence implicating a high-ranking hospital administrator in the embezzlement scheme. The name of this third conspirator remains confidential as the investigation continues, but court documents indicate this individual may have orchestrated the entire operation, using Doctors Montgomery and Whitman as skilled executors. The camera cut to footage of the hospital's administrative building, then to a file photo of the board of directors, men and women in business attire, smiling for a publicity shot. Among them, Brielle recognized several faces from charity galas and hospital functions she had attended with Elliot. One face in particular stood out: Harvard-educated hospital CEO Catherine Blackwell, whose husband served on the Museum of Fine Arts board. The same board that had pressured Margaret Chen to place Brielle on unpaid leave. As the pieces connected in her mind, Brielle felt a cold certainty. Her professional exile hadn't been about museum donors' discomfort. It had been strategic, removing her from a position where she might access influential people who could help her case. The realization was both chilling and clarifying. The web of deception extended beyond Elliot and James, encompassing powerful figures who had worked to isolate and discredit her while protecting themselves. For months, Brielle had focused on survival, securing housing, income, legal representation. Now, with those basic needs addressed, a new determination took root. She would not merely survive this ordeal, she would expose every person involved regardless of their position or power. Her phone rang. An unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. "Mrs. Montgomery, this is Special Agent Mercer. We need to speak immediately. There's been a development in your husband's case that directly affects your safety." The momentary sense of resolution evaporated, replaced by familiar dread. Just as one chapter of this nightmare seemed to be closing, another was beginning. And this one, Agent Mercer's tone suggested, might be the most dangerous yet. The federal courthouse loomed against the September sky, its granite facade stoic and unyielding. At 28 weeks pregnant, Brielle felt conspicuous as she navigated the crowd of reporters gathered on the steps. Her navy maternity dress and blazer, purchased specifically for her testimony, couldn't disguise her prominent belly. "Ms. Montgomery, how does it feel to testify against your husband? Brielle, will you seek full custody of the baby? Is it true you've been offered a book deal about the scandal?" Wesley materialized beside her, creating a buffer between Brielle and the shouting journalists. "Eyes forward, almost there," he murmured, guiding her toward the entrance where Alexandra waited. "The prosecution needs you focused today," Alexandra said once they were safely inside. "Elliot's defense team will try to rattle you, paint you as a scorned woman seeking revenge. Remember our strategy. Stick to facts, stay calm, and direct all technical financial questions to the experts." Brielle nodded, her hand instinctively cradling her stomach as the baby kicked vigorously. "Is she here? Catherine Blackwell?" "Yes. She was indicted last week after they found the offshore transfers linking her to the scheme. Her trial is separate, but she's listed as a defense witness for Elliot." The revelation that Catherine Blackwell, respected hospital CEO and civic leader, had been the architect of the embezzlement scheme had stunned Boston society. The FBI had traced millions flowing through her husband's investment firm into the same Cayman accounts that Elliot and James had accessed. "And they still can't find the Vermont property?" Brielle asked. "Nothing under Henderson's name or Elliot's aliases," Alexandra confirmed. "But Agent Mercer is convinced it exists. The cash had to go somewhere." They were ushered into a small conference room to wait. The trial had been underway for 2 weeks, with James Whitman and Vanessa already having testified for the prosecution. Today was Brielle's turn, a day she had both dreaded and anticipated for months. "Remember what we discussed about the threatening emails," Alexandra cautioned. "The defense will claim they came from a random stalker, not Elliot. Stick to what you know firsthand." The threatening messages had begun arriving shortly after Agent Mercer's warning call 3 months earlier. First to her personal email, then her university account, and finally her cell phone. Detailed descriptions of her daily routines, warnings to protect what matters, and ominous references to her pregnancy. The FBI had traced the messages to public computers and burner phones, nothing that could definitively connect them to Elliot, who remained in federal custody. Yet Brielle knew it was him. The phrasing, the psychological pressure points, the timing of the messages. They bore his unmistakable signature. "Ms. Montgomery?" A judicial assistant appeared at the door. "They're ready for you." The courtroom fell silent as Brielle entered. She kept her eyes forward, avoiding Elliot's gaze from the defense table, and focused on the polished wooden witness stand. After being sworn in, she finally allowed herself to look at the man who had once been her husband. Elliot Montgomery had always been handsome, but confinement had hardened his features. His trademark silver-tinged hair was now cropped short, his tailored suits replaced by a conservative navy jacket that couldn't quite disguise its off-the-rack origins. Yet he still carried himself with the same confidence, the same controlled poise that had once attracted her. Their eyes met. Elliot smiled, a small, private expression that chilled her more than any glare could have. It was the smile he used when he knew something others didn't. "Ms. Montgomery," the prosecutor began, "please describe for the jury your financial relationship with the defendant during your marriage." For the next hour, Brielle detailed their joint accounts, investment decisions, and the gradual way Elliot had assumed complete control of their finances. She explained finding forged signatures on transfers from her inheritance, suspicious cash withdrawals, and the home equity line of credit she hadn't authorized. "And at any point during your 5-year marriage, did you suspect your husband was embezzling from the Cardiology Foundation?" "No," Brielle answered truthfully. "I trusted him completely." The cross-examination was precisely as brutal as Alexandra had warned. Elliot's attorney, a sharp-featured woman whose services reportedly cost $1,000 per hour, approached with calculating calm. "Ms. Montgomery, isn't it true that your grandfather's trust fund provisions require you to be married to access the full inheritance at age 35? "Objection. Relevance," the prosecutor called. "Goes to motive, Your Honor," the defense attorney countered. "The prosecution claims Dr. Montgomery married my client for financial gain. I'm establishing that Ms. Montgomery had equal financial incentive to maintain the marriage." "I'll allow it," the judge ruled. "Please answer the question, Ms. Montgomery." "The trust does contain provisions regarding marital status," Brielle conceded, "but they can be amended with the trustee's approval." "Which you've already requested, correct? Just 3 weeks after filing for divorce?" Brielle felt a flush creeping up her neck. "Yes. In fact, Ms. Montgomery, isn't it possible you've cooperated so enthusiastically with the prosecution to ensure those trustees view you favorably, to protect your inheritance even as you divorce the defendant?" "Objection," badgering the witness. "Sustained." The defense attorney switched tactics. "Ms. Montgomery, who is Wesley Reed?" The unexpected question caught Brielle off guard. "He's a friend." "A friend who accompanied you to court today? A friend who helped you move into your new apartment? A friend who attends your prenatal appointments?" "Yes, to all 3, Brielle replied, struggling to maintain composure. "Mr. Reed has been supportive during a difficult time." "Isn't it true that you and Mr. Reed have developed a romantic relationship? That he stays overnight at your apartment regularly?" "Objection," the prosecutor shouted. "Ms. Montgomery's personal relationships are not relevant to this case." "Your Honor, The defense is establishing that Ms. Montgomery had personal motives to fabricate evidence against my client. Her relationship with Mr. Reed began suspiciously close to the time of Dr. Montgomery's arrest. The judge frowned. I'll allow limited questioning on this matter. Brielle felt trapped. Her friendship with Wesley had indeed evolved into something deeper over the summer months, a development that had surprised them both. But they had been discreet, aware of how it might be perceived. Wesley and I became friends after the night at Aurelia restaurant, she stated carefully. Our relationship has evolved since then, yes, but that has no bearing on the financial evidence against Dr. Montgomery. So you admit you're romantically involved with another man while carrying the defendant's child? Objection. Sustained. Counsel, control your questioning. Throughout this exchange, Brielle refused to look at Elliot, focusing instead on the jury. 7 women and 5 men whose expressions ranged from sympathy to scrutiny. After 3 grueling hours, Brielle was finally excused. As she carefully descended from the witness stand, her path took her directly past the defense table. Elliot leaned forward slightly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. You should have checked the cottage floorboards, Brie. Too late now. The cryptic comment followed her out of the courtroom, reinforcing her certainty that Henderson's Vermont property remained central to whatever game Elliot was still playing. He's planning something, Brielle insisted, as she, Alexandra, and Agent Mercer gathered in the courthouse conference room. That comment about floorboards wasn't random. We searched the cottage thoroughly, Mercer replied, frustration evident in her tone. Nothing under the floors, in the walls, anywhere on the property. Then we missed something, Brielle persisted. Elliot doesn't make idle threats or empty statements. Everything he does is calculated. Alexandra checked her watch. The jury could be deliberating for days. If there's evidence at that cottage, we need to find it before a verdict. I'll send a team back, Mercer agreed reluctantly. But without more specific information. I'll go, Brielle decided suddenly. I spent a weekend there 5 years ago. I might notice something the agents missed. Absolutely not, both women replied in unison. You're 7 months pregnant, Alexandra added, and potentially being stalked by associates of your estranged husband. The last thing you should do is travel to an isolated location. I'll bring Wesley, Brielle countered, and Agent Mercer can send agents to accompany us. This may be our last chance to uncover whatever Elliot's hiding. Against their better judgment, the plan was formed. Brielle and Wesley would drive to Vermont the following morning, accompanied by 2 FBI agents. If nothing else, it would keep Brielle away from the media circus until the jury reached a verdict. The Henderson cottage sat on the shore of a secluded lake, its weathered cedar siding blending with the surrounding pines. Fall had begun to touch the landscape, painting the distant hills with splashes of crimson and gold. You're sure about this? Wesley asked as they approached the front porch. We can still turn around, let the FBI handle it. I'm sure, Brielle replied, though her certainty wavered as memories of her previous visit flooded back. Elliot grilling steaks on the deck, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing as the sun set over the water. A perfect weekend, orchestrated by a man who had never truly existed. The FBI agents conducted another sweep of the property before allowing Brielle and Wesley inside. The cottage was exactly as she remembered, rustic but comfortable, with a stone fireplace dominating the main room and picture windows overlooking the lake. Malcolm Henderson died last year, Agent Harlow explained as they entered. The property has been in legal limbo since then. No evidence that Dr. Montgomery purchased it, but he could have been using it under an arrangement with Henderson. Brielle moved through the space slowly, absorbing details. The kitchen where she'd helped prepare breakfast, the deck where they'd watched stars, the bedroom where... She paused, frowning. This room is smaller than I remember. Ma'am? Agent Harlow looked up from his notes. The master bedroom. It doesn't extend as far as it should based on the exterior dimensions. A thorough examination revealed a false wall concealing a small office, complete with a desk, secure filing cabinet and safe. The agents called for a forensic team while Brielle sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by this new evidence of Elliot's deception. Even during their romantic weekend, he had slipped away at times, claiming to check email or make calls. Had he been accessing this hidden room while she slept? The safe required specialized equipment to open. As they waited for the additional FBI team, Brielle's phone rang with a call from Alexandra. The jury's back, her attorney said without preamble. Verdict will be read tomorrow morning. You need to return to Boston immediately. We found a hidden room, Brielle told her. With a safe, they're bringing equipment to open it now. That's significant, Alexandra acknowledged, but it doesn't change the timing. The judge won't delay the verdict reading. You need to be in that courtroom tomorrow at 9 a.m. Wesley drove while Brielle dozed fitfully in the passenger seat, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. Agent Mercer had promised to call the moment the safe was opened, but as they crossed back into Massachusetts, her phone remained silent. The courtroom was packed the following morning. Media representatives filled the public seating, sketch artists poised with pencils since cameras weren't allowed. Brielle sat directly behind the prosecution table, Wesley beside her as the jury filed in. Elliot appeared unnervingly calm, his expression betraying nothing as the foreman handed the verdict form to the judge. The room held its collective breath as the judge reviewed the document, his face impassive. "Will the defendant please rise?" Elliot stood, buttoning his jacket with steady hands. On count 1, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, the jury finds the defendant guilty. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. On count 2, money laundering, the jury finds the defendant guilty. Brielle exhaled slowly, feeling tension drain from her shoulders. On counts 3 through 7, filing false tax returns, the jury finds the defendant guilty. With each pronouncement, Elliot's posture remained unchanged. Shoulders back, chin high, eyes forward. Only someone who knew him intimately would recognize the slight tightening around his mouth that betrayed his rage. "The defendant is remanded to custody pending sentencing," the judge concluded. Court is adjourned. As federal marshals approached to escort Elliot out, he turned and looked directly at Brielle. "Congratulations," he said, his voice carrying in the momentary silence. "You've won. I hope it was worth the cost." Before she could respond, her phone vibrated with a text from Agent Mercer. Safe contained offshore account details and thumb drive with encrypted files. Also, personal letters. "Call me immediately." Something in Elliot's satisfied expression, despite his conviction, sent alarm bells ringing through Brielle's mind. She grabbed Wesley's arm as they exited the courtroom, pulling him aside in the corridor. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "He's too calm. It's like he expected this outcome." "Of course he did," Wesley reasoned. "The evidence was overwhelming." "No, it's more than that. He wanted me to find that safe. Whatever was inside." Her phone rang, interrupting her theory. "Agent Mercer, what did you find?" "Ms. Montgomery, where are you right now?" "At the courthouse. The verdict just came in. Guilty on all counts." "I need you to come to our office immediately. There's something you need to see." The gravity in Mercer's voice accelerated Brielle's heartbeat. "What is it? What was in the safe?" "Not over the phone. But I will tell you this. The thumb drive contained detailed dossiers on everyone connected to the case, including extensive surveillance photos of you, Mr. Reed, Ms. Caldwell, and others, some taken as recently as last week." "That's impossible," Brielle protested. "Elliot's been in custody for months." "Exactly," Mercer replied grimly, "which means he has an accomplice we haven't identified. Someone who's been watching you all this time." As she ended the call, Brielle noticed a court officer approaching with purposeful strides. "Ms. Montgomery, there's a matter requiring your attention in Judge Harrison's chambers." "What matter?" Alexandra asked, materializing at Brielle's side. "A sealed family court petition filed this morning," the officer explained, "regarding custody of your unborn child." Confusion clouded Brielle's face. "But the criminal verdict just came in. Elliot has no grounds for custody while serving a federal sentence." "The petition wasn't filed by Dr. Montgomery," the officer clarified. "It was filed by Mrs. Diane Montgomery, the defendant's mother." The revelation hit Brielle like a physical blow. Diane Montgomery, a formidable Boston socialite who had always treated Brielle with thinly veiled disdain, had scarcely been mentioned during the proceedings. She had not attended the trial, had not communicated with Brielle since Elliot's arrest, had seemingly distanced herself from the entire scandal. Now, apparently, she was fighting for access to her grandchild. "This is a delay tactic," Alexandra assured Brielle as they followed the officer. A desperate move by Elliot using his mother as a proxy. But Brielle wasn't so certain. As they approached the judge's chambers, she felt the baby shift and kick vigorously, as if sensing her mother's distress. The past months had been a master class in survival, in rebuilding from ruins. She had faced public humiliation, financial devastation, and professional exile with growing resilience. Yet this new threat, targeting not her reputation or finances but her child, awakened a primal fear unlike anything she had experienced before. In Judge Harrison's austere office, Diane Montgomery sat ramrod straight, her silver hair swept into an immaculate chignon. At 72, she retained the aristocratic beauty that had once graced Boston's society pages. Beside her sat not one, but 3 attorneys from the city's most prestigious family law firm. "Ms. Montgomery," Judge Harrison began once they were seated, "I've reviewed this emergency petition and find sufficient grounds for a hearing. Mrs. Montgomery is seeking grandparental visitation rights and partial legal guardianship of the child upon birth." "On what possible grounds?" Alexandra demanded. "The petition cites concerns about the child's welfare given recent events," one of Diane's attorneys replied smoothly. "Mrs. Montgomery can provide stability, financial security, and appropriate social standing, resources the mother currently lacks." "This is absurd," Brielle started, but Alexandra touched her arm in warning. "Your Honor," Alexandra addressed the judge, "my client has been fully cleared of any involvement in her estranged husband's crimes. She has stable housing, employment, and health care. There are no legitimate grounds for questioning her fitness as a mother." "Nevertheless," Judge Harrison replied, "Massachusetts law recognizes grandparental rights under certain circumstances. I'm setting a hearing date for 2 weeks from today." As they left the chambers, Diane Montgomery approached Brielle directly, the first time they had spoken in nearly a year. "You've taken everything else from my family," the older woman said, her voice low but piercing. "You won't take my grandchild, too." "I didn't take anything from your family," Brielle replied, struggling to control her anger. "Your son destroyed our marriage through his own actions." Diane's perfect features hardened. "You could have stood by him. Instead, you testified against him, exposed him to public shame, turned his friends against him. A loyal wife would have protected her husband. A loyal husband wouldn't have stolen millions, conducted multiple affairs, or threatened the mother of his child," Brielle countered. "But this isn't really about loyalty, is it? It's about control. Elliot's controlling me from his cell, using you as his weapon." Something flickered in Diane's eyes, not guilt or recognition, but a cold calculation that reminded Brielle disturbingly of Elliot. "You understand nothing about our family," she said finally, "but you will." As Diane and her legal team departed, Brielle felt a sudden wave of dizziness. Wesley was instantly at her side, guiding her to a bench. "Deep breaths," he murmured, his nursing training evident in his calm efficiency. "Your blood pressure is probably spiking. We need to get you somewhere quiet." But there was no quiet to be found. Beyond the courthouse doors, reporters shouted questions about the verdict. Agent Mercer waited at the FBI office with whatever disturbing evidence the safe had yielded. And now a new battle loomed, one that threatened not just Brielle's peace but her child's future. The baby kicked again, more insistently this time. Brielle pressed her hand against the movement, a silent promise to protect this new life, regardless of cost. She had survived Elliot's betrayal, the financial fallout, the professional setbacks. She would survive this too. But as she met Wesley's worried gaze, a cold certainty settled in her heart. Elliot Montgomery might be going to prison, but their battle was far from over. In fact, the most dangerous phase was just beginning. October painted Boston in fiery hues as Brielle sat in her new apartment's bay window, watching leaves swirl across the small courtyard. That 36 weeks pregnant, movement had become cumbersome, her body feeling simultaneously foreign and intensely her own, in ways she'd never experienced before. "Tea with honey as requested," Wesley said, placing a steaming mug on the side table. "And the latest update from Alexandra." Brielle accepted the manila folder with a grateful smile. 3 weeks had passed since Elliot's conviction, a period filled with legal motions, counter-motions, and preparations for both his sentencing hearing and the grandparental rights case brought by Diane Montgomery. "Diane's petition has been amended," she noted, scanning the documents. "She's no longer seeking partial guardianship, just regular visitation after the birth." "That's progress," Wesley offered, settling into the adjacent armchair. The apartment, a 2-bedroom in a quiet Cambridge neighborhood, bore the hallmarks of their evolving relationship. Wesley's nursing textbooks shared shelf space with Brielle's art history volumes. His practical kitchenware complemented her few salvaged pieces of fine china. "It's strategy," Brielle corrected, rubbing her lower back absently. Alexandra thinks Diane's lawyers advised her to narrow the request to improve her chances. Monthly supervised visits sound reasonable to a family court judge. And what does Alexandra recommend? A settlement with strict conditions, Brielle sighed. Limited visits, only at neutral locations, with me present at all times. No overnight stays ever, no international travel, no communication with Elliot about the baby. The question of how to handle her child's paternal grandmother had consumed Brielle's thoughts for weeks. She had no desire to subject her daughter, the ultrasound had confirmed a girl at 20 weeks, to Diane Montgomery's cold perfectionism and manipulative nature. Yet the legal battle was draining resources and energy Brielle desperately needed to conserve as her due date approached. The FBI finished analyzing everything from the safe, she continued, turning to another document. The surveillance dossiers, offshore account details and personal correspondence all point to Catherine Blackwell as Elliot's primary accomplice in the embezzlement scheme. But there were also detailed records of Elliot's previous affairs, all meticulously documented with dates, locations, photos. He kept records of his own infidelities? Wesley asked, bewildered. Not for himself, Brielle explained. Agent Mercer believes he was collecting leverage. Each woman represented a potential threat if she ever discovered the financial crimes. The documentation gave him control. She didn't mention the photos of herself among the files, ordinary moments captured without her knowledge. Brielle entering her apartment building, teaching at Boston University, meeting Vanessa for coffee. The images spanned months, continuing well after Elliot's incarceration, suggesting a hired photographer or accomplice still operating on his behalf. There's more, she said, reaching the final page in Alexandra's update. Sentencing is scheduled for next Tuesday. The prosecution is seeking 18 years. Alexandra thinks I should attend. Is that what you want? Brielle pressed her palm against the spot where her daughter was stretching or kicking. I don't know. Part of me never wants to see him again. Another part needs something. Closure, maybe. Or confirmation that it's truly over. Wesley studied her face. The face he had grown to love over these tumultuous months. He saw the shadows beneath her eyes, the tension at her temples, but also the quiet determination that had emerged through crisis. Whatever you decide, he assured her, I'll support you. But you don't owe Elliot anything, not your presence, not your energy, not your thoughts. His words resonated with an ongoing internal dialogue. Throughout her marriage, Brielle had constructed her life around Elliot's needs, priorities, and schedule. Even during the trial, she had remained emotionally tethered to him, analyzing his motives, anticipating his moves. Perhaps true freedom required severing that final invisible cord. Her phone chimed with a message from Vanessa. Finished my testimony against Blackwell. Exhausted, but relieved. Still on for dinner tomorrow. The friendship that had begun in the most improbable circumstances had deepened into something neither woman had expected. Vanessa's testimony against Catherine Blackwell, currently on trial for her role as the financial architect behind the embezzlement, had been crucial for the prosecution. I should get ready for class, Brielle said, carefully leveraging herself up from the window seat. Boston University had honored her one-year contract despite the publicity surrounding the trial. Her course on contemporary conservation techniques had attracted a full roster of students, and teaching had become an unexpected source of normalcy amid the chaos. Dr. Chen called again, Wesley mentioned, as he helped gather her materials. The museum board is reconsidering your sabbatical status. Reconsidering now that I've been publicly vindicated, and they look terrible for abandoning me. Brielle's tone carried an edge. I'm not sure I want to return to an institution that values appearances over loyalty. The professional fallout from the scandal had taught Brielle painful lessons about institutional support. Colleagues she'd considered friends had maintained careful distance. Arts organizations had rescinded speaking invitations. Restoration clients had cancelled contracts. Only Professor Harlow from Harvard's Art History Department had reached out immediately after the arrest, offering Brielle project work that could be done remotely. You don't have to decide anything now, Wesley reminded her. The BU position is secure through spring semester. By then the baby will be 6 months old and we'll have a better sense of what works for our family. Our family. The phrase still carried a hint of wonder. Neither of them had expected their relationship to evolve so quickly, from friendship to romance to planning a shared future. Yet the crucible of crisis had accelerated their connection. revealing compatibilities and complementary strengths. "Have you thought more about my suggestion?" Wesley asked as he drove her to campus. "About meeting with Dr. Levinson?" Dr. Sarah Levinson was a trauma specialist Wesley knew from his clinical rotations. He had gently but persistently encouraged Brielle to consider therapy to process the compound traumas of the past year. "I made an appointment," Brielle admitted, "for Thursday. You were right. I need to address this before the baby comes. I don't want to carry this weight into motherhood." Wesley squeezed her hand, pride evident in his expression. "That's a huge step, Brie." "A necessary one," she agreed. "Alexandra says the sentencing judge will consider victim impact statements. I'm not sure I can write mine without professional help processing everything first." The federal courthouse looked different in the autumn light, less imposing, more mundane. Brielle had chosen to attend the sentencing alone, a decision both Alexandra and Wesley had respectfully accepted despite their concerns. "The defendant will rise," Judge Perkins instructed as the proceedings began. Elliot stood, his posture military straight despite the prison jumpsuit that had replaced his tailored suits. 8 weeks in federal detention had thinned his face and dulled the silver in his hair, yet his expression remained impassive as the judge reviewed the jury's findings and sentencing guidelines. "Before imposing sentence, I'll hear victim impact statements," Judge Perkins continued. "The court has received written statements from multiple victims of the financial crimes. However, I understand Mrs. Montgomery wishes to address the court directly." Brielle rose carefully, one hand supporting her lower back as she approached the lectern. This close to delivery, her pregnancy was unmistakable, drawing subtle glances from the courtroom staff and spectators. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steadier than she had expected, "I've spent months trying to quantify the impact of Elliot Montgomery's crimes. The financial damage is measurable: stolen funds, legal fees, lost income. But how do you measure the cost of discovering your entire marriage was a calculated fraud? How do you assign value to trust that can never be fully restored?" She paused, allowing her gaze to meet Elliot's directly for the first time. His blue eyes, once so captivating to her, revealed nothing. "When I married Elliot Montgomery, I believed in the man he presented himself to be. Brilliant, ethical, committed. That man never existed. Instead, he was a carefully constructed fiction designed to access my family connections, my professional reputation, and eventually, my inheritance." Brielle touched her stomach gently. "The greatest victim of his deception isn't me. It's our daughter, who will be born in the coming weeks. She'll grow up knowing her father prioritized money and power over family and integrity. She'll inherit the shadow of his crimes, the whispers, the internet search results, the unwanted notoriety." She drew a deep breath, centering herself. "I'm not here seeking vengeance. I'm here requesting protection for myself, for my child, and for any future victims Elliot Montgomery might target if given the opportunity. His pattern of calculated exploitation spans decades and escalates with each success. Without significant intervention and serious consequences, that pattern will continue." As she returned to her seat, she felt Elliot's eyes following her, the same penetrating gaze that had once made her feel specially chosen, now revealing only cold assessment. Judge Perkins spent nearly 40 minutes detailing his sentencing rationale, emphasizing the breach of public trust inherent in stealing from a medical foundation, the sophisticated nature of the scheme, and the lack of genuine remorse exhibited by the defendant. "Taking all factors into consideration," he concluded, "this court sentences the defendant to 17 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Restitution will be ordered in the amount of $4.7 million. The sentence, at the higher end of the guidelines, sent a ripple of reaction through the courtroom. Brielle remained still, absorbing the finality of the moment. 17 years. Their daughter would be nearly an adult when Elliot completed his sentence. As federal marshals prepared to escort Elliot from the courtroom, he turned toward Brielle. "A moment with my wife, please," he requested, "to discuss our child." Judge Perkins looked to Brielle, who nodded her consent. Under the watchful eyes of marshals and Alexandra, who had entered during the proceedings, Elliot approached the gallery railing separating them. "You did well," he said quietly, his tone reminiscent of how he used to praise her after successfully navigating a difficult social event. "Very convincing performance." "It wasn't a performance, Elliot." "No?" A familiar half-smile played at his lips. "You always had a flair for the dramatic. It's what made you effective at fundraising galas." Brielle recognized the attempt to diminish her, to reframe her authentic testimony as calculated theatrics, projecting his own manipulative nature onto her. "What do you want, Elliot? I've agreed to reasonable grandparent visitation with your mother. There's nothing else to discuss." His expression shifted subtly. "You think this is over? 17 years isn't forever, Brielle. I'll be 60 when I'm released. Plenty of time for a second chapter." He glanced meaningfully at her pregnant belly. "And my daughter will want to know her father. Children always do eventually." Instead of the fear he clearly intended to provoke, Brielle felt an unexpected calm. "You're right. Someday she might seek you out. As an adult, making her own informed choice. And if she does, she'll meet you with clear eyes and a strong sense of herself, raised by people who value honesty and integrity." Something flickered in Elliot's gaze. Frustration at her response, perhaps, or genuine regret. For a moment he seemed about to speak more candidly. Instead he straightened his shoulders. "Tell my mother I expect regular updates about the child." "Your mother will follow the court's visitation parameters exactly," Brielle replied firmly. "Nothing more." As the marshals led him away, Brielle remained seated, one hand protectively cradling her belly. The encounter had yielded an unexpected revelation. The man who had once dominated her thoughts, her decisions, her very sense of self, now seemed diminished. A skilled manipulator whose tactics she could now recognize and neutralize. Outside the courthouse, Alexandra guided Brielle through a light rain toward their waiting car. "You did brilliantly," the attorney assured her. "The judge clearly took your statement to heart." "It's really over," Brielle murmured, more to herself than Alexandra. "Legally, at least." "The civil suits will continue for years," Alexandra cautioned, "but the Foundation's insurers are handling those. Your divorce is final, the criminal case is resolved, and the agreement with Diane Montgomery is nearly settled. You can focus on the future now." The future. For months, Brielle had operated in crisis mode, responding to legal emergencies, financial pressures, media intrusions. The concept of planning beyond the next hearing or deadline felt almost foreign. "I got another call from the MFA board yesterday," she said as they drove through rain-slicked streets. "They're offering me my position back with a raise and extended maternity leave." "That's excellent news," Alexandra enthused. "Will you accept?" Brielle watched Boston pass by through the rain-streaked window. "I'm not sure. Part of me wants to return to the work I love, the collections I've nurtured. Another part feels I've outgrown the institution, or at least outgrown my willingness to compromise." "You have options," Alexandra reminded her. "The BU position, private restoration work, even museum opportunities outside Boston. Don't feel pressured to decide immediately." As they pulled up to Brielle's apartment building, she spotted Wesley waiting under the covered entrance, concern evident in his posture, until he saw her emerge from the car. "How did it go?" he asked, umbrella ready as he approached. 17 years, she replied, "and a conversation that should have left me shaken, but somehow didn't." His relief was palpable as he guided her inside, one hand resting protectively at the small of her back. "I made that butternut squash soup you've been craving, and Vanessa called. She's bringing dessert from that French bakery you liked." The simple domesticity of the moment, Wesley's thoughtful preparation, the expected arrival of a friend, plans for a quiet dinner in their home, struck Brielle with unexpected emotional force. This normalcy, this genuine care, represented everything her marriage to Elliot had lacked beneath its polished veneer. Inside their apartment, baby preparations were evident everywhere. A bassinet in the corner of the living room, folded onesies on the coffee table waiting to be put away, pregnancy books stacked beside medical journals on the bookshelf. Wesley had installed the car seat the previous weekend, and they'd completed a virtual childbirth class together, lying side by side on a yoga mat as the instructor demonstrated breathing techniques. "I've been thinking about names," Brielle said as she settled onto the sofa. "Something completely disconnected from either family. A fresh start." "I like that approach," Wesley agreed, bringing her a glass of water with the lemon slice she'd been craving throughout pregnancy. "Any frontrunners?" "Claire," she said decisively. "It means clear, bright. It feels right." Wesley smiled, testing the name. "Claire. I like it." "Claire Reed Montgomery is a lot of name for a tiny person," Brielle acknowledged. At Wesley's startled expression, she added, "If the offer still stands." 2 weeks earlier, he had carefully, almost hesitantly suggested that while the baby would legally be Claire Montgomery, she might also carry his surname in some form. The gesture had caught Brielle off guard, not because it was unwelcome, but because it represented a commitment she hadn't allowed herself to anticipate. "The offer absolutely stands," Wesley confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "But are you sure? With everything else settling, you don't need to make this decision now." "I'm sure." Brielle met his gaze steadily. "The past year has taught me not to defer important decisions out of fear or convention. You've become my family, Wesley. Chosen family, the most honest kind." The past year had also taught her to recognize authentic love, not the performative devotion Elliot had displayed for social advantage, but the quiet reliability Wesley demonstrated daily. He had seen her at her most vulnerable, supported her through crisis, and never once used her dependency to assert control. The doorbell interrupted their moment. Vanessa entered bearing a pink pastry box and news of her own. "They've offered me a position in Chicago," she announced as she set out delicate fruit tarts on dessert plates. "Chief of Anesthesiology at Northwestern Memorial. I start in January." "Vanessa, that's wonderful," Brielle said, genuinely pleased for her friend's fresh start, away from the scandal's epicenter. "It feels like the right time to leave Boston," Vanessa admitted. "My testimony against Catherine is complete. The medical board has fully cleared me of any wrongdoing, and professionally," she shrugged eloquently, "some institutional memories are too long." The three shared dinner, discussing Vanessa's plans, the sentencing hearing, and preparations for the baby's imminent arrival. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter, a sound that had been absent from Brielle's life for far too long. As they cleared dishes together, Vanessa said quietly, "I never expected us to become friends. That first night at Aurelia, when you looked at me across the table, I wanted to hate you," Brielle admitted. "It would have been easier." "For me too," Vanessa agreed. "Hating you would have let me avoid facing my own poor judgment. Instead, I had to acknowledge I'd been as deceived as you were, just in different ways." Their unlikely friendship had developed through shared trauma and recovered dignity, a bond neither woman had anticipated, but both now valued deeply. Later that evening, after Vanessa had left and Wesley had fallen asleep beside her, Brielle lay awake, one hand resting on her active baby. The past year's journey replayed in her mind, from successful professional with a seemingly perfect marriage to publicly humiliated victim, from financial security to frozen assets, from isolation to unexpected allies. The losses were significant: her home, certain friendships, professional opportunities, financial stability, and trust that would require years to fully rebuild. Yet amid the wreckage, she had discovered authentic connection, internal resilience, and a clearer sense of her own worth independent of external validation. Her weekly sessions with Dr. Levinson had helped her recognize that while Elliot's betrayal had shattered her life structure, it had also freed her from patterns of accommodation and compromise that had diminished her over time. The therapist had introduced the concept of post-traumatic growth, the potential for profound positive change following life crises. As if responding to her thoughts, Claire kicked vigorously, a small foot or elbow creating a visible protrusion on Brielle's belly. She smiled in the darkness, whispering, "I feel you, little one, we're going to be okay. One more push, Brielle." The baby's almost here. 38 hours of labor had left Brielle exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced. The carefully crafted birth plan, music, dimmed lights, minimal interventions, had given way to medical necessity, as labor failed to progress and the baby showed signs of distress. "I can't," she gasped, falling back against the pillows. "I have nothing left." Wesley, who had not left her side except when required for medical procedures, wiped her forehead with a cool cloth. "How you can do this, Brie? You're the strongest person I've ever known. One more push for Claire." Drawing on reserves she didn't know existed, Brielle bore down with the next contraction. The pressure peaked, then released suddenly as Claire Reed Montgomery entered the world at 3:47 a.m. on October 28th, nearly 2 weeks past her due date, and after a labor that had tested her mother's endurance to its limits. "She's perfect," the doctor announced, placing the wailing infant on Brielle's chest. 8 pounds 3 ounces. Time seemed to suspend as Brielle gazed at her daughter for the first time, the dark, damp hair, the tiny, clenched fists, the fierce determination in her newborn cry. Nothing in her life, not professional accomplishments, not social recognition, not even the vindication of Elliot's conviction, had prepared her for the overwhelming surge of love and protectiveness that engulfed her. "Hello, Claire," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've been waiting for you." Wesley stood beside them, his own eyes glistening as he gently touched the baby's tiny hand. "She has your chin," he observed, voice thick with emotion, "and definitely your determination." The medical team efficiently completed their tasks, cleaning and weighing the baby, delivering the placenta, ensuring Brielle's stability after the prolonged labor. Through it all, Brielle remained focused on her daughter, memorizing every feature, marveling at the perfect miniature fingernails, the delicate eyelashes, the bow-shaped mouth. When they were finally alone in the recovery room, Claire sleeping peacefully in a bassinet beside the bed, Brielle reached for Wesley's hand. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." He smiled, exhaustion and joy mingling in his expression. "Thank you for letting me be part of this, part of your lives." Brielle studied his face, the kind eyes that had first shown compassion during her humiliation at Aurelia, the strong hands that had steadied her through months of crisis, the quiet integrity that contrasted so sharply with Elliot's calculated charm. "We're a family now," she said softly, "an unconventional one perhaps, but real." As dawn broke over Boston, painting the hospital room in pale golden light, Brielle Montgomery held her daughter close, breathing in her newborn's scent. The journey to this moment had cost her dearly. Her marriage, her home, her reputation, her financial security, her professional standing. The road ahead would hold its own challenges. Diane Montgomery's visitation rights, ongoing civil litigation, financial rebuilding, career decisions. Yet cradling Claire against her heart, with Wesley keeping watchful vigil beside them, Brielle felt a profound certainty. The price had been worth paying. Through the crucible of betrayal and loss, she had discovered an authentic strength, forged genuine connections, and created a family built on truth rather than appearances. Claire stirred in her arms, dark blue eyes blinking open to study her mother's face with newborn intensity. In that gaze, Brielle saw not the shadows of the past, but the promise of the future, a future she would shape on her own terms, with hard-won wisdom and newfound courage. The victory had indeed been bitter, the cost undeniably high. But as Claire's tiny fingers curled reflexively around her mother's, Brielle knew with absolute clarity that she had gained something far more valuable than anything she had lost. 5 years later, "Mommy, look, I restored it." Claire Reed Montgomery stood proudly beside her small work table, carefully holding a ceramic figurine. At 5 years old, she possessed her mother's auburn hair, her biological father's determined chin, and a passionate interest in fixing broken things. "That's beautiful work, sweetheart," Brielle praised, examining the small horse that had lost a leg during Claire's enthusiastic play the previous week. "Your adhesive application is very precise." "Wesley showed me how to use just a little bit," Claire explained seriously. "He says too much glue makes a bigger mess than the break." "Wesley is very wise," Brielle agreed, meeting her husband's amused gaze across their sun-filled kitchen. The Cambridge townhouse they had purchased 3 years earlier reflected their blended lives, Wesley's practical medical texts sharing shelves with Brielle's art volumes, Claire's creative projects displayed alongside family photographs. The home studio where Brielle conducted her private restoration consulting occupied the converted garage, its specialized ventilation system and north-facing windows, a compromise between professional requirements and family life. "Ready for your big day tomorrow?" Wesley asked, placing a cup of tea beside Brielle's laptop. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, glancing at the speech draft on her screen. Tomorrow she would officially assume the directorship of the Center for Art Conservation at Harvard, a position that represented both professional triumph and personal vindication. The journey back to professional prominence had been arduous. After Claire's birth, Brielle had declined the MFA's belated offer to reinstate her, instead accepting a 1-year extension at Boston University while building a private restoration practice. Her meticulous work on several significant private collections had gradually rebuilt her professional reputation, leading to consulting opportunities with museums nationwide. When Harvard established the new Conservation Center 2 years ago, they had approached Brielle not despite her connection to the Montgomery scandal, but partly because of it. Her resilience and ethical clarity during that period had impressed key decision-makers on the university's board. "The babysitter will be here at 6, Wesley reminded her, checking his watch. "We should leave for the restaurant by 6:30. Tonight they were meeting Vanessa for dinner during her brief visit to Boston. After 5 successful years as Northwestern Memorial's chief of anesthesiology, she had recently accepted a prestigious position with Doctors Without Borders, preparing to deploy to field hospitals in conflict zones. "Claire Bear, time to clean up," Brielle called. "Aunt Vanessa is excited to see how much you've grown." As Claire carefully put away her restoration tools, miniature versions of professional equipment that Wesley had adapted for smaller hands, Brielle reflected on the unlikely friendship that had endured across years and distance. Vanessa's annual visits had become a cherished tradition, each reunion marking another year of healing and growth for both women. Aurelia Restaurant had changed ownership since that fateful night, nearly 6 years earlier, but the elegant interior remained largely the same. As they were led to their table, Brielle felt a momentary disorientation, memory overlaying present reality. "You okay?" Wesley asked quietly, his hand steady at the small of her back. "Fine," she assured him. "Just remembering." Vanessa rose to greet them, looking trim and polished in a simple black dress, her once-long hair now cut in a practical bob. The women embraced warmly, their complicated history long since transformed into genuine affection. "Chicago's frigid weather clearly agrees with you," Brielle observed as they settled at the table. "For 2 more months?" Vanessa corrected with a smile. "Then it's wherever MSF needs me most. Likely Sudan or Yemen initially." The conversation flowed easily through dinner, catching up on professional developments and mutual acquaintances. Catherine Blackwell was serving 15 years for her role in the embezzlement scheme. James Whitman, after cooperating extensively with authorities, had completed his reduced 3-year sentence and moved to Arizona, where he now taught medical ethics at a community college, a ironic but seemingly genuine rehabilitation. "Have you heard anything about Elliot?" Vanessa finally asked, the question that inevitably arose during their reunions. "Only through Diane's quarterly updates," Brielle replied. The carefully negotiated grandparent visitation agreement had evolved over time into a workable arrangement, 4 supervised visits annually, with detailed restrictions that Diane surprisingly had honored scrupulously. "He's teaching mathematics to other inmates," Wesley added. Alexandra heard from the prosecutor that he's been a model prisoner, likely positioning himself for early release consideration. Brielle had long ago stopped tracking Elliot's prison journey in detail. The emotional energy required to maintain vigilance had proven too costly, especially compared to the joy of focusing on her daughter's development and her own rebuilding. "Claire starts kindergarten next month," she said, deliberately changing the subject. "She's already reading at a 2nd grade level and correcting the art history books when they get restoration techniques wrong. A perfect blend of her parents," Vanessa observed warmly, including Wesley in her glance. The adoption had been finalized on Claire's 3rd birthday, a legal recognition of the bond that had existed since her birth. Wesley Reed Montgomery had proven to be everything Elliot was not: consistently present, genuinely supportive, honest even when truth was difficult. As dinner concluded, Brielle excused herself briefly. Walking toward the restrooms, she passed the private dining section where Sophia Whitman had been sitting that fateful night. The memory no longer carried its former sting. Time and perspective had transformed acute pain into something more nuanced, a chapter in her life rather than its defining moment. In the elegantly appointed powder room, Brielle studied her reflection. At 38, she looked different than she had at 32. A few fine lines around her eyes, a confidence in her posture that hadn't existed before. The wealthy doctor's wife with the prestigious museum position had become a more authentic version of herself, a respected conservation leader, a devoted mother, a woman who had learned to value substance over appearance. The victory had indeed come at significant cost. Her inheritance had been substantially diminished by legal fees and the financial fallout from Elliot's crimes. Certain social circles remained closed to her. Whispers still occasionally followed her at professional events, and Claire would someday need to understand the complicated truth about her biological father. Yet what remained was unquestionably more valuable: genuine friendships forged in crisis, professional respect earned through resilience rather than connections, and a family built on choice rather than obligation. As Brielle returned to the table, her phone chimed with a message from Alexandra. Judge approved final dispersal of recovered assets. Foundation restitution complete. Your remaining funds released. Call tomorrow for details. With this notification, the last legal thread connecting her to Elliot Montgomery was finally severed. The embezzlement restitution, insurance claims, and civil settlements that had dominated her financial landscape for years were now resolved. Good news? Wesley asked, noting her expression. The best kind, she confirmed. Closure. The following evening, as applause faded from the Harvard reception, formally announcing her appointment, Brielle found herself approached by Margaret Chen, her former director at the MFA, now retired. A well-deserved achievement, Margaret said, offering congratulations, though I've always regretted how things ended at the museum. Brielle regarded the woman who had once placed institutional reputation above personal loyalty. Everything worked out as it should, she replied evenly. I discovered where I truly belong. Indeed, Margaret acknowledged, a hint of regret in her tone. Sometimes the wrong paths lead us to the right destinations, eventually. Later, walking home with Wesley through Cambridge's tree-lined streets, Brielle recounted the exchange. 5 years ago, I would have been bitter seeing her. Tonight, I realized I genuinely don't harbor resentment anymore. That's the difference between moving on and truly healing, Wesley observed. You're not just functioning despite what happened. You've integrated it into who you are now. At home, they found Claire asleep, surrounded by books about art restoration and medicine, her two passions reflecting the adults who had shaped her young life. Brielle tucked the blanket more securely around her daughter, gently brushing auburn curls from her forehead. She looks like you when she's concentrating, Wesley said softly from the doorway, that same little furrow between her eyebrows. But she has your heart, Brielle replied, joining him, your capacity for empathy and care. As they stood watching their sleeping daughter, Brielle reflected on how profoundly her understanding of family had transformed. The superficial perfection she had once pursued with Elliot had been replaced by something far more substantial, a partnership built on shared values, mutual respect, and authentic connection. The next morning, Brielle sat at her desk in the Harvard Conservation Center, arranging family photos beside her academic credentials. Through the window, she could see students crossing the quad, their futures still unfolding before them. Her phone lit up with a text from Vanessa, heading to airport. Dinner was wonderful. So proud of where you've landed, figuratively and literally. You transformed catastrophe into renaissance. The metaphor was apt. In art restoration, Brielle had learned that sometimes damage creates opportunity, revealing underlying layers, prompting examination of original intentions, allowing for thoughtful reconstruction rather than mere repair. Her own restoration had followed a similar path. The betrayal that shattered her carefully constructed life had ultimately revealed its underlying weaknesses and created space for something more authentic to emerge. The scars remained visible to those who knew where to look, but they had become part of the whole, evidence of history rather than defects to disguise. As Brielle prepared to welcome her first graduate students, she glanced again at the family photo on her desk, Claire between her and Wesley at the beach last summer, all three laughing as waves crashed behind them. The joy captured in that moment was genuine, hard-won, and profoundly appreciated because of everything that had preceded it. The Montgomery scandal would always be part of her story, a chapter that had shaped but not defined her. What mattered more was the narrative she had constructed from its aftermath, a story of resilience, authenticity, and the courage to build something new from the ruins of what was lost. Outside her window, autumn leaves drifted across Harvard Yard, their brilliant transformation a reminder that change, even painful change, often heralds new beauty if one has the patience and wisdom to wait for it to emerge. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now and we'll see you there.